They held the disabled woman's wheelchair, forcing her to watch as they viciously kicked her loyal service dog. The dog, who understood her every silent tear, could only cry out in pain. Men laughed, believing their money could buy them out of any crime. But they didn't count on the one man running in the park, a man who just happened to be a Navy SEAL, and he was about to deliver a side of justice they would never forget. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from, and if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. The heat in Savannah, Georgia, doesn't just rest on you, it wraps around you. A damp, heavy blanket woven from humidity, history, and the faint, sweet smell of jasmine and river mud. It was 4 in the afternoon, and the city's famous for park was steeped in a lazy, golden light. Ancient live oaks draped in theatrical shawls of Spanish moss filtered the sunlight, casting intricate shadows on the wide walking paths. Iris Parker felt the sticky warmth on her arms and forehead as she worked. She was positioned near the iconic white fountain, her sketchbook resting on a specialized lap desk fitted to her wheelchair. In front of her, an easel held a canvas capturing the interplay of water and light. Iris, a woman in her late 20s with intelligent dark eyes and hair tied up in a messy bun to escape the humidity, was a painter. Her work was gaining notoriety in the local galleries, known for capturing the unique, haunting atmosphere of the low country. Her paralysis, the result of a collision with a drunk driver 3 years prior, had stolen the use of her legs, but it had refined the focus in her hands and eyes. Her wheelchair, a lightweight, custom-built extension of herself, was simply how she moved through the world. Beside her, lying alert, but at ease on the grass, was Valor. He was a magnificent German shepherd, his black and tan coat gleaming. He was not merely a pet. He was her trained service animal, a constant, reassuring presence. His official vest was off, allowing him to rest, but his senses were perpetually active. He watched the tourists, the joggers, and the squirrels, his head occasionally tilting, but he remained tethered to Iris's emotional state, a silent guardian. She paused her brush work, reaching down to scratch the soft fur behind his ear. "It's too hot even for the ghost today." "Ha, boy," she murmured. Valor thumped his tail twice against the ground, a quiet acknowledgment. It was a peaceful afternoon, the kind of quiet stillness that allowed her creativity to flow. The distant sounds of city traffic muffled by the park's dense greenery. The peace was shattered not gradually, but instantly by the guttural, obnoxious roar of a high-performance engine. Metallic blue convertible, far too expensive and loud for these historic streets, screeched to a halt on the park's perimeter road, its tires complaining against the asphalt. The stereo pumped out a rhythm that felt like a physical assault on the quiet. 3 young men spilled out, laughing loudly. They looked cast from the same mold, expensive polo shirts, boat shoes worn without socks, and sunglasses that cost more than Iris's monthly rent for her studio. The one who emerged from the driver's seat was clearly the leader. This was Preston Davenport. He was tall with carefully disheveled blonde hair and the easy, arrogant confidence of someone who had never been told no in his life. His family's name was etched onto half the buildings in the city, a dynasty built on shipping and real estate, and he moved as if he owned the very ground he walked on. Flanking him were Chad Albright, stocky and broad-shouldered, and Brody Croft, lanky and nervous, both functioning as the leader's audience and enforcers. They were bored, wealthy, and looking for a distraction. Their eyes scanned the park and landed on the easiest target, the woman in the wheelchair and her dog. They began to walk over, their voices carrying. "Look at that mutt," Press said loud enough for Iris to hear. "Think it can do any tricks?" Chad chuckled, picking up a small twig and tossing it toward Valor. "Fetch, dog, fetch." Valor ignored the twig. He didn't move, but his body tensed. He rose silently from his lying position to a seated one, placing himself directly between Iris's wheelchair and the approaching men. His posture was not aggressive, but defensive, a living shield. Iris sighed, her focus broken, her hand tightening on her brush. "He's a service animal," she called out, her voice firm and clear. "He's working. Please leave him alone." She hated the confrontation, but she hated the casual cruelty of people like this even more. Her request seemed to amuse them. "Oh, it's a service animal," Press mocked, using air quotes. He stepped closer, right into Iris's personal space. Valor didn't growl, but a low rumble vibrated deep in his chest. "He looks mean," Brody said, stopping a few feet back. "He's not mean," Iris said, addressing Press directly, her eyes locking with his shaded gaze. "He's trained now. Please go away. You're disturbing us." For a moment, Preston Davenport IV just stared at her. It was a look of pure disbelief. He, the heir to the Davenport fortune, was being dismissed by her, by a girl in a chair. The amusement vanished from his face, replaced by a sudden cold flash of malice. His ego, fragile and oversized, had been bruised. "What did you say to me?" he asked, his voice dropping. "I said go away," Iris repeated, refusing to look down. That was her mistake. She had challenged him. She had failed to show the difference he demanded. "You don't tell me what to do," Press sneered. He took a sip from a metal flask he pulled from his pocket. The smell of expensive whiskey cutting through the hot air. He then casually flicked the small metal cap of the flask, hitting Valor sharply on the nose. Valor yelped, a short, surprised sound of pain, shaking his head. "That was it. Stop it!" Iris yelled, her voice sharp. "Get away from him." Press smiled. It was a terrible thin-lipped expression. "You heard her, guys," he said to his friends. "She wants us to go." He looked back at Iris, his eyes glittering. "But I don't think we will. I think you need to be taught some manners." He nodded to his friends. "Hold her." Chad and Brody hesitated for just a second. They hadn't signed up for this, but a sharp look from Press sent them moving. Before Iris could react, they flanked her. Chad grabbed the handle of her left wheel and Brody grabbed the right, holding the chair immobile. "Don't touch me," Iris shouted, panic rising in her throat. He struggled, but the chair was held fast. "Let go of my chair." Valor, seeing his owner restrained and sensing her terror, finally broke his passive stance. He lunged forward, barking, a deep, protective roar aimed at Chad, but he never made it. Press was faster. With a vicious and practiced motion, he kicked. His boat shoe connected hard with Valor's ribs. The dog let out a strangled cry, collapsing onto the grass. The wind knocked out of him. "No!" Iris screamed, lunging forward. But the chair wouldn't move. Press stepped over to her, his shadow falling across her canvas. He grabbed her hair, yanking her head back, forcing her to look at him. "You shut your mouth," he hissed, the smell of whiskey strong on his breath. and then, with an open palm, he slapped her hard. The sound was shockingly loud. In the quiet park, Iris's head snapped to the side, her cheek exploding in pain, tears springing to her eyes more from shock and humiliation than the sting. She was trapped, utterly helpless. "Now," Press whispered, his voice dangerously calm as he held her hair, forcing her head to turn toward the dog. Valor was struggling to his feet, wheezing, his eyes fixed on Iris. "You're going to sit right there, and you are going to watch. You're going to watch while we teach this stupid mutt what happens when it barks at me." He released her hair with a shove. He turned to Brody. "Kick him." Brody looked sick, but he didn't dare refuse. As Iris watched in frozen horror, unable to move, unable to scream, trapped by the hands holding her chair, Press and Brody advanced on the wounded German shepherd. The first kick landed, and Iris finally found her voice. It wasn't a word, just a raw, desperate sound of anguish that echoed uselessly under the ancient, indifferent oaks. 200 yards away on the park's perimeter jogging path, Hugo Scott was nearing the end of his 5-mile run. He was a man built of dense muscle and quiet intensity, moving with an easy, grounding lope that spoke of limitless endurance. His face was angular, his eyes a deep, focused gray, and his short-cut brown hair was dark with sweat. Hugo was an active duty Navy SEAL, currently on a short mandatory leave in Savannah to decompress after an operation he was already trying to forget. He ran without headphones, a habit drilled into him by his profession. Awareness was survival, even on home soil. The park's background noise was a familiar rhythm. Distant traffic, the laughter of students, the buzz of psychas. He was filtering it all out, focused on his breathing, until two sounds sliced through the mundane. The first was the sharp, pained yelp of a dog. The second, a fraction of a second later, was a woman's scream. Not a startled shriek, but a raw, desperate cry of no. Hugo's body reacted before his mind finished processing. His cadence didn't break, his direction simply altered. He pivoted on the ball of his foot, vaulting a low box hedge and cutting across the open grass, his eyes scanning, acquiring the scene, registered in a cold, tactical snapshot. One woman in a wheelchair, held fast by two men. One man, the blonde leader, standing over her, triumphant. A second man kicking a German shepherd on the ground. 3 hostiles, 1 primary victim, 1 secondary. His speed increased, but it was a controlled, silent surge, his feet barely seeming to touch the grass. He was a ghost moving through the dappled sunlight. He did not shout a warning. A warning was a gift, a luxury you gave to someone you didn't perceive as an immediate threat. These men were not that. Chad Albright, the stocky one, holding the left wheel of Iris's chair, was laughing at the dog's cry when he felt a sudden, crushing pressure around his neck. An arm, hard as a steel cable, had locked around his throat from behind. He didn't even have time to register surprise. His hands flew up, clawing uselessly at the forearm, cutting off his air, his vision narrowing to a pinpoint. Hugo applied the rear naked choke with practiced, devastating efficiency. He held it for precisely 3 seconds, just until Chad's body went limp, then released the hold, letting the man drop to the grass like a discarded sack. He had made no sound. The entire takedown was silent. Press and Brody were still focused on valor, reveling in their power. Brody, the lanky one, was drawing back his foot, for another kick when a flicker of movement, the shadow of Chad falling, made him turn. He saw a shape anew. Man, and his eyes widened in confusion. That confusion was all the time Hugo needed. Hugo didn't waste motion on a wind-up punch. He took one step, closing the gap, and delivered a palm heel strike directly to Brody's solar plexus. The impact was dull, a heavy, sickening thud. All the air in Brody's lungs evacuated in a single desperate gasp. That made no noise. His eyes bulged and he folded in on himself, clutching his stomach as he crumpled to his knees. Unable to breathe, unable to think. The threats neutralized in under 5 seconds. Now there was only one. Preston. Davenport spun around, his cruel smile vanishing, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of pure shock. His 2 friends were on the ground. Standing between him and them was a man unlike anyone he had ever encountered. This wasn't a fellow student or a disgruntled local. This was something else. Hugo was breathing calmly, not even heavily from his run. He was drenched in sweat, his muscles stark, and his gray eyes were absolutely flat, devoid of any emotion Press could recognize, save for a cold, terrifying focus. Press's mind, which moved so quickly when he was in control, simply stalled. He saw his escape route, the car, and he saw the man blocking it. He raised his hands, a pathetic, reflexive gesture of surrender. "Hey, man," he stammered, his voice cracking. We were just, it was a joke. We were just joking." Hugo took one slow, deliberate step toward him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The quiet of the park suddenly seemed to amplify his words, making them echo in the humid air. "You joked," Hugo stated, his voice a low, growly monotone. That was more chilling than any shout. Press flinched, his bravado evaporating so completely it was as if it had never existed. He was a child, small and terrified, standing before a true predator. He began to back away, stumbling over his own feet. "I'm sorry," he whispered, a word he had likely never used with sincerity. "We'll go." "We're going." Hugo stopped, letting him maintain the distance. He looked from Press to the whimpering dog, then to the woman in the chair who was staring at him, her hand over her mouth, her face stained with tears and a bright red mark on her cheek. His gaze snapped back to Press, and the cold focus ignited into a flicker of pure, controlled loathing. Press physically recoiled from the look. "Get him," Hugo ordered, nodding at the gasping Brody. "And him," he indicated the unconscious Chad. "Get them out of here." Press, desperate to comply, scrambled to pull Brody to his feet. Brody was still wheezing, snot and tears running down his face as he tried to stand. "Now," Hugo said, his voice dropping even lower. Press and Brody, clumsy with panic, half-dragged, half-carried Chad's dead weight across the grass toward the convertible. They threw him into the back seat, scrambled into the front, and fumbled with the ignition. Press looked back one last time, his face pale with terror. Hugo was still standing there, watching him. He hadn't moved. The engine roared to life and the car peeled out, tires screaming in protest, leaving the smell of burnt rubber and expensive cologne hanging in the heavy savannah air. The park was suddenly, violently quiet. The only sounds were Iris's ragged, choked sobs and the high-pitched, painful whining of Valor, who was trying to drag himself toward her. Hugo stood for a moment, his fists slowly unclenching, his breathing steady. The adrenaline receded, leaving behind the familiar, dull ache. He turned, the lethal shadow, vanishing, and his full attention settled on Iris and her dog. The shriek of the convertible's tires faded, leaving a sudden ringing silence in Forsyth Park. The air, which moments before had been electric with violence and fear, now felt heavy and still thick with the aftermath. Iris Parker was trembling so hard her wheelchair vibrated, her breaths coming in short, gasping sobs. The bright red mark on her cheek throbbed in time with her frantic pulse. Valor, her brave, broken dog, was whining, a high-pitched, agonizing sound as he tried to crawl the last few feet to her, his hind legs dragging slightly. She was frozen, her mind unable to bridge the gap between the terror of the attack and this sudden, shocking quiet. The man who had saved them was still standing where the car had been, his back to her. He was a statue of coiled tension, his hands still fisted, his shoulders broad and rigid. Iris watched him, terrified of him too. He had appeared like a wraith, and had dismantled 3 men with a speed and efficiency that was inhuman. Then he moved. Iris flinched, but he didn't turn toward her. Not yet. He rolled his shoulders, a single, deliberate motion. His head dropped and he took one long, deep breath, his entire body seeming to deflate, the lethal tension draining out of him like water. His fisted hands slowly uncurled, his fingers stretching. When he finally turned, the man who faced her was not the same one who had confronted Press. The flat, cold, gray killer's eyes were gone. In their place was a look of deep, penetrating concern, a focused quiet that was just as intense, but entirely different. He walked toward her, his movements economical, his eyes flicking between her and the whimpering dog. He stopped a few feet away, careful not to crowd her, his gaze settling on Valor. "Is he friendly?" His voice was low and calm, a different texture from the growly command that had terrified Press. It was a voice, she thought, that was used to being heard, a voice that reassured. Iris could only nod, unable to find her own words. He gave her a single nod of acknowledgment and moved past her to the dog. He didn't just kneel. He dropped into a professional one-knee crouch, his hands hovering over Valor's body before making contact. "Easy, boy," he murmured. "Easy. I'm going to check you out." Valor, who would normally shy away from a strange man, seemed to sense the confidence in his touch. He wed, but he allowed the examination, his tail giving a single pathetic thump. Iris watched, mesmerized by the contrast. The hands that had moved with blinding, brutal speed were now impossibly gentle. His fingers, calloused and strong, probed Valor's ribs, his head, his legs with the light, practiced touch of a medic. On his running belt, Iris now noticed a small black zippered pouch. He unzipped it, revealing a tightly packed individual first aid kit. It was not a standard runner's kit. It looked professional, military.
"Well," Hugo said, his voice calm, "he's got at least 2 broken ribs. I can feel. Possibly 3. You did good, boy. You took the hits." He pulled out a roll of self-adhering compression bandage. "He needs an emergency vet immediately, but this will keep the ribs stable for the ride so he can breathe easier." As Iris watched him work, his movements efficient and sure, her shock began to recede, replaced by a profound sense of whiplash. This man was a walking contradiction. He was a storm of violence 1 second and a gentle caregiver the next. He had saved them. He had saved Valor. The tears that had been frozen by fear began to flow again. this time from a well of gratitude so deep it ached. Thank you, she finally whispered, her voiciero and broken. You they were. Hugo didn't look up from his work, keeping his focus on the dog. I know, he said, his voice gentle but firm. Just breathe. He's okay.
You're okay.
They're gone.
He finished wrapping
Valor's torso, securing the bandage with a practiced rip. He gave the dog one last reassuring pat on the head before
standing.
Now his full attention settled on her. He crouched in front of her wheelchair, bringing himself down to her eye level. His gray eyes scanned her face, and his gaze hardened as he focused on the bright red hand-shaped mark on her cheek. He didn't reach out to touch it, for which she was grateful. She felt like she might shatter, but his proximity was intense, focused. He hit you, he stated. It wasn't a question. The coldness she'd seen earlier flickered back into his eyes, a dangerous spark in the depths. Are you hurt anywhere else? Did they do anything
else?
Iris shook her head, pulling the tattered remnants of her composure around her. No, just that. He held my hair. I'm okay. He nodded slowly, accepting her answer, though his jaw remained tight. Good. He stood up, his gaze sweeping the area. Her sketchbook was on the ground, open, its pages dirted. Her brushes were scattered. Where's your vehicle? The blue van. She pointed, her hand trembling. Over on Bull Street. It has a ramp. He nodded. Stay here. He moved with purpose, gathering her easel, her paints, her scattered brushes, folding the legs and securing her lap desk.
He did it with a
neatness that suggested practice. He packed her art bag, his movements betraying no awkwardness, and hung it from the back of her chair. Then he returned to Valor. Okay, boy, he said
softly.
Time to go. With one smooth, powerful motion, Hugo scooped the 80-pound German Shepherd into his arms. He lifted him as if he weighed nothing, cradling him against his chest. Valor yelped once, then settled, seeming to understand he was being helped.
Lead
the way, Hugo said to Iris. She pushed the wheels of her chair, her arms aching, her mind numb, leading her savior, who was carrying her other savior, to the van. He waited patiently as she used her remote to unlock the doors and deploy the side ramp. He watched her guide the chair up and lock it into the driver's position, his expression unreadable. Once she was secure, he stepped into the van, moving past her to the open space in the back. He gently laid Valor on a blanket she
kept there.
He'll be okay for the
ride, he said.
He stepped back out, standing on the sidewalk as she swiveled her chair to face him. The moment hung between them. I don't know who you are, she said, her voice small.
Or how
I can ever. He cut her off, not unkindly. He was already pulling a small, waterproof notebook and a pen from his IFAC pouch. He tore out a page and scribbled a number on it. Get him to an emergency vet now, he said.
The
gentleness was gone, replaced by a tone of command, but it felt protective, not aggressive. He handed her the small, damp piece of paper. My name is Hugo. I'm in town for 2 more weeks. That's my number. He locked his gaze with hers. If you have any more trouble from them, even if they just drive by, or for any other reason, you call me.
Day or night.
It doesn't matter. Do you understand? Iris looked from the number written in strong blocky print to his face. His gray eyes weren't cold, and they weren't
warm.
They were just steady, present.
He
was seeing her, not her chair, not her tears, just her. And in his eyes, she saw a profound, unspoken understanding. He had seen the world's ugliness, and he had chosen to stand against it. She clutched the paper. Yes, she whispered. I understand. He nodded once, a sharp, definite movement. Be safe, Iris.
He
Knew her name. He must have seen it on her sketchbook. He stepped back from the
van.
Iris hit the button to close the ramp and the door, her hand shaking.
She
Started the engine, her eyes meeting his. One last time through the window before she pulled away from the curb. Hugo Scott stood on the sidewalk, a solitary figure in the humid savannah heat, watching until the blue van disappeared around the corner.
The drive
To the Savannah Emergency Vet Clinic was a blur of adrenaline and muffled sobs. Iris's hands were slick with sweat on the specialized hand controls of her van, her cheek throbbing, her mind replaying the sickening thud of the kicks landing on Valor's body. Hugo's makeshift compression wrap was a stark white against her dog's dark fur in the rearview mirror. Valor himself was quiet, too quiet, his breathing shallow, and that silence terrified her more than his whining had. She clutched the small, damp piece of paper with Hugo's number in her hand, the ink already blurring
slightly.
It felt like the only solid thing in a world that had just tilted off its axis. She pulled into the emergency bay, deploying her ramp and rushing inside, her wheels squeaking on the linoleum as she pushed Valor's gurney, which a technician had thankfully brought out to
The van.
They were met by Dr. Eris Thorne, a tall, kind-eyed man in his 40s, with a calming presence and gentle hands.